A fugitive immigrant forces a millionaire to marry her in exchange for the lives of his 3 wheelchair-bound children. Then he marries her, and on their wedding night, he discovers this. Comment, giving a rating from 0 to 10 for my story. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The office door burst open with such force that papers on the desk flew like dry leaves in the wind. The woman who stormed in had dark hair disheveled by the rain and the desperate eyes of someone carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Her hands trembled as she clutched a document folder to her chest, as if it were her last hope of salvation. The man sitting behind the mahogany desk looked up from his computer, surprised by the unexpected intrusion. At 30 years old, he had built a business empire that placed him among the most influential in the city. His impeccable suit and aristocratic demeanor contrasted sharply with the desperate appearance of the woman before him. His perfectly combed hair and cold blue eyes reflected years of ruthless negotiations and decisions that moved millions. She approached the desk with hesitant steps, leaving small puddles of rainwater on the expensive carpet. The 30-year-old immigrant had lost everything when her husband left unexpectedly, leaving her alone with 3 children who needed special care. Her simple, worn clothes told the story of months struggling to survive in a foreign country where every day was a battle against hunger and despair. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice thick but determined. "I have something that could destroy everything you've built." The businessman leaned back in his leather chair, studying the woman with renewed interest. He was used to empty threats from competitors and amateur blackmailers, but there was something different in her eyes, a mixture of terror and courage that made him pay attention. "My husband worked as a freelance accountant for your company," she continued, opening the folder with trembling fingers. "Before he left me these documents. They concern your financial practices." The papers spread across the desk like cards from a cruel deck. Numbers, spreadsheets, bank records that made the businessman's blood run cold. He immediately recognized the meticulous handwriting of the accountant who had worked on some of his most sensitive projects. Documents that revealed questionable investments and partnerships he preferred to keep away from the eyes of the authorities. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice lower now, quickly calculating the consequences of that revelation. She took a deep breath, gathering strength for the proposal that would change both their lives forever. "Protection. My children are being threatened by people who want these papers. They have special needs, and I can't protect them alone." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Outside, the rain lashed against the windows of the 30th floor as the two stared at each other like adversaries in a chess match where the pieces were their own lives. "3 children," she murmured, her voice breaking. "The boy is 4 years old and needs constant physical therapy. The twin girls, also 4, depend on wheelchairs. I can't work enough to pay for the treatments and still protect them." The businessman knew the value of information well. Those documents in the wrong hands could not only ruin his reputation, but also result in investigations that would cost millions in fines and lawsuits. His fortune, carefully built through investments in stocks and diversified holdings, could crumble like a house of cards. "What kind of protection do you have in mind?" he asked, although he already suspected the answer. "Marriage," she said simply. "A prenuptial agreement that gives us legal family status. In exchange, these documents will never see the light of day." The proposal was audacious and desperate at the same time. He studied her face, looking for signs of lying or manipulation, but found only the determined gaze of a mother willing to do anything for her children. The small scar above her left eyebrow spoke of past struggles, and her calloused hands revealed years of hard work. 6 months, she continued. "Enough time for the threats to cease, and I can find a way to start over. After that, we can separate amicably." The man stood up and walked to the window, watching the city that stretched out beneath him. Each building, each light represented opportunities and achievements he had accumulated over the years. His company controlled investments that moved millions in the financial market, and his stock portfolio was envied by the biggest speculators on Wall Street. But here was a woman offering a deal that could protect it all, a marriage of convenience that would keep his secrets buried while offering protection to a vulnerable family. The irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. The man who controlled fortunes was being controlled by someone who barely had enough to eat. "What if I refuse?" he asked, still with his back to her. "Then these documents will reach the press tomorrow morning," she replied, her voice firm despite the evident fear. "And you'll find that a desperate mother can be more dangerous than any competitor." He turned slowly, assessing the determination in her eyes. He had spent years dominating boardrooms and intimidating adversaries, but he recognized a force equal to his own when he saw it. This woman wasn't bluffing. "Very well," he said finally. "But we'll have to make it look convincing. Society can't suspect that this is a business arrangement." The relief that passed over her face was almost imperceptible, but he noticed it. For the first time since she had entered the office, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she murmured, and there was genuine gratitude in her voice. "Don't thank me yet," he said, returning to his desk. "You have no idea what you're getting into. My life is complicated, and now yours will be too." She nodded, understanding that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. "My children are worth any complication." As they discussed the practical details of the agreement, neither imagined that this cold, calculated transaction would turn into something much deeper and more dangerous. Fate had placed two wounded souls on the same path, and the coming months would reveal secrets that would change not only their lives, but those of many others. The businessman looked one last time at the documents scattered on the desk. In a few hours, he would be committed to a charade that could both save him and destroy him completely. But as he observed the silent determination of that woman, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the curiosity to discover who the person behind that desperate proposal really was. The civil ceremony took place on a grey Tuesday morning at the most discreet courthouse in the city. Only two hired witnesses were present, observing in silence as two lives intertwined for reasons that had nothing to do with love. She wore a simple dress borrowed from a neighbor, while he maintained the same cold expression he used in business meetings. When they left the courthouse as husband and wife, neither dared to look directly at the other. The agreement was sealed, but the reality of living together still seemed surreal. The businessman had prepared an entire wing of his mansion to accommodate the new family, ensuring there was enough space to maintain the necessary distance. The first time he saw the three children was when the driver brought the family to the property. The 4-year-old boy was asleep in the back seat, exhausted after a physical therapy session that had lasted all morning. The two twin girls, also 4, watched everything with curious eyes from their wheelchairs, whispering to each other in a language he didn't understand. "They're scared," explained the new wife, noticing how he was watching the children. "They've moved homes so many times in the last few months that they don't know what to expect anymore." The mansion was too imposing, with its marble corridors and high ceilings that echoed every step. The businessman realized how the children cringed before the excessive luxury, clinging to their mother's clothes as if they were afraid of getting lost in that labyrinth of wealth. "The girls' room is on the first floor," he said, trying to soften his voice. "I had an access ramp installed and grab bars in the bathroom." She looked at him surprised. She didn't expect him to have thought of the practical details of her daughter's disabilities. For weeks, she had imagined they would have to adapt to a hostile environment, but she found care that showed unexpected consideration. The first days were tense and filled with awkward silences. He left early for the office and returned late, avoiding any unnecessary contact with the temporary family. She spent her time taking care of the children, carefully exploring the house and trying to establish a routine that would bring some normalcy to that bizarre situation. It was on a rainy morning that everything began to change. The businessman was having coffee in the sunroom when he heard a desperate cry coming from upstairs. He took the stairs 2 at a time and found the boy on the floor of his room, trying to reach a toy that had fallen under the bed. "My leg won't listen," the boy said through tears, his words mixed with a foreign accent. Mommy went to take the girls to the doctor. Without thinking twice, the businessman bent down and picked up the toy. It was a small wooden car, hand-painted with vibrant colors. When he handed it to the boy, he received a smile so pure and grateful that he felt something strange clench in his chest. "Do you want help getting back into bed?" he asked, surprised by the kindness in his own voice. The boy nodded, and when the businessman lifted him in his arms, he felt how light and fragile the small body was. There were scars on the child's legs, marks from surgeries and treatments that told a story of pain that no child should know. "Are you really Mommy's husband?" the boy asked as he was placed back in bed. "Yes," he replied, the word coming out harder than he expected. "Then are you my father now?" The question hit him like a punch to the stomach. He had never considered the emotional implications of the agreement for the children. For them, it wasn't a marriage of convenience, but the possibility of having a father figure they had long lacked. "For now," he said carefully, "I'm here to take care of you." When his wife returned with the twins, she found the businessman sitting on the floor of the room, helping his son with physical therapy exercises he had learned by watching videos on his cell phone. The scene left her speechless. The cold, calculating man she had met in the office was patiently counting repetitions as the boy tried to move his right leg. "The physical therapist couldn't come today," she explained, still processing what she saw. "So I improvised," he said, getting up and wiping his hands on the fabric of his dress pants. "I researched some basic exercises. I hope I didn't do anything wrong." That night, after the children had fallen asleep, the two met in the kitchen. She was making tea while he reviewed work documents at the table. The silence between them had taken on a different quality, less hostile and more careful. "Why did you do that today?" she asked, pouring a cup for him without him even asking. "He needed help," he replied simply, accepting the tea. "And I was home." She sat down across the table, watching him over the steaming cup. "You don't have to pretend you care. The agreement is just for legal protection." "I'm not pretending," he said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that surprised them both. "Today, when I saw that boy on the floor, I didn't think about our agreement. I just thought he needed help." The following days brought a strange but workable routine. He started arriving home earlier from work, always finding excuses to check on the children. He discovered that the twins loved stories, especially the ones he invented about businessmen who turned into heroes to save the world. "You're getting attached to them," the wife observed one afternoon, as she watched him playing building towers with blocks adapted for the girls' small hands. "They're smart kids," he replied, avoiding looking directly at her. "They deserve to have opportunities." "And when the 6 months are up?" The question hung in the air like a loaded cloud. He hadn't thought about it lately. The 6-month agreement, which had once seemed like an eternity, was now starting to seem insufficient. It was around this time that they received the first real threat. A letter arrived with no return address, with words cut out of newspapers, forming a clear message: "The documents or the children will suffer the consequences." The wife turned pale as she read the letter, her hands trembling as they had that first day in the office. "They found us," she murmured. "We're not safe, even here." The businessman felt a cold rage take over his chest. Someone was threatening those children, and it awakened in him a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. He picked up the phone and made a call to the head of company security. "I want 24-hour surveillance at my house," he ordered. and hire the best private investigators in the city. Someone is threatening my family." When he hung up the phone, he realized he had used the word family without thinking. He looked at his wife, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "No one is going to hurt those children," he said, his voice full of determination. "Not while they're under my protection." That night she appeared at the door to his office, hesitant. "Can I come in?" He nodded, closing his laptop. She approached slowly, carrying 2 cups of tea that had become a silent ritual between them. "Thank you," she said, sitting down in the armchair across from the desk, "for what you did today, for the security threats." "It's part of the agreement," he replied, but without the coldness of before. "No," she shook her head, "this goes beyond what we agreed." "You really care?" They looked at each other across the table, and for the first time since the wedding, the walls of protection that both had built began to show cracks. There was something growing between them, something dangerous and unexpected that threatened to turn that business arrangement into something much more complicated. "The children are getting attached to you," she said softly, "and you to them. And does that bother you?" "It scares me," she admitted. "Because I'm starting to too." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Both understood what was happening, even without wanting to admit it. The 6-month agreement was turning into something neither had planned. A real family, with real feelings and real consequences. But outside the mansion, in the shadows of the night, someone watched and planned. The threats were just the beginning, and the real enemies had not yet shown their faces. 3 weeks after the first threat, life in the mansion had found a dangerously comfortable rhythm. The businessman found that waking up to the children's laughter in the backyard was much more pleasant than the cold silence of the days before the wedding. His mornings now included checking if the twins had taken their medication and helping the boy with his morning physical therapy exercises. The private investigation had begun to reveal disturbing information. The head of security brought a detailed report on a rainy afternoon, while the children slept after lunch. The investigators had discovered that the threats came from a much more complex network than they had initially imagined. "These aren't just common criminals," explained the security chief, spreading photographs and documents on the office desk. "We're dealing with a scheme that involves fraudulent medical clinics. They charge fortunes from desperate families, promising revolutionary treatments for children with disabilities." The wife turned pale as she heard the details. "My husband discovered this before he left," she murmured. "That's why they threatened him. That's why we needed to run." The businessman studied the photographs, recognizing some faces. One of the clinics mentioned in the report was precisely the one where he had invested $2 million through his private foundation. The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. "Wait," he said, picking up one of the documents. "I know this place. My company funded research at this clinic last year." The silence that followed was filled with tension. She looked at him with an expression that mixed shock and something close to betrayal. "Did you know?" "No," he replied quickly. "I believed I was investing in legitimate research. They presented me with convincing results, studies that seemed promising." The investigator continued his report, revealing that the clinic had applied experimental treatments to hundreds of children, charging astronomical amounts from vulnerable families. Many of the procedures were useless or even harmful, but desperate parents paid any amount for the hope of a cure. "Your company wasn't the only one deceived," said the investigator. "They had a very convincing front. Renowned doctors, falsified research, fabricated testimonials. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Among the documents was a list of patients, and the businessman recognized 3 names that made his blood run cold. The names of the 3 children he now called family. "They treated the children," he said, his voice barely audible. "The twins and the boy are on this list." The wife snatched the paper from his hands, her eyes desperately running through the lines. "I spent all our savings on those treatments," she whispered. I sold everything we had. My husband tried to warn me, but I was so desperate. The guilt that took over the businessman was overwhelming. His money had funded part of that suffering. His fortune, built through careful investments, had been used to deceive families like the one he now protected. How many families were harmed? He asked the investigator. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They had been operating for more than 5 years, moving from city to city when they began to arouse suspicion. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, he and his wife sat in the sunroom. The tension between them had changed in quality, now laden with painful revelations and shared guilt. "Do you hate me?" he asked, breaking the heavy silence. "I should," she replied, looking at the stars through the glass. "But you were deceived too, and I've seen how you treat my children. I saw the anger in your eyes when you discovered the truth. I'm going to return every penny," he said with determination, "and I'm going to make sure that all the families harmed receive compensation." "With what money?" she asked, turning to look at him. "If you give everything back, your company won't survive." It was true. Compensating all the victims of the scheme would cost a fortune that would severely compromise his business. But looking at the house where 3 children slept safely, he realized that there were things more important than profits and stocks. "Then so be it," he said simply. It was at that moment that she realized who the man she had married really was. Not the cold businessman she had met in the office, but someone capable of sacrificing his fortune for principles he didn't even know he possessed. The physical proximity between them had become inevitable. Taking care of the children together meant brushing hands when helping with medications, meeting in the hallway during the early morning hours when one of the girls had nightmares, sharing knowing glances when the boy managed to take one more step than the day before. "We're in dangerous territory," she murmured one morning when he appeared in the kitchen in just his pajamas, his hair disheveled from sleep. "What?" he asked, still sleepy. "This," she said, gesturing between the two of them, "this intimacy. It wasn't part of the agreement." He stopped pouring coffee and looked directly at her. "Do you want me to stop?" The question hung in the air between them. She knew she should say yes, that she should maintain the barriers that protected her heart. But when she looked at him, she saw not only the man who had agreed to protect her family, but someone who was willing to sacrifice everything for people he barely knew. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. The moment was interrupted by the sound of small footsteps coming down the stairs. The boy appeared in the kitchen, dragging his right foot, but managing to walk without support for the first time in months. "Look," he shouted proudly, "I can walk by myself." The joy that took over both of them was genuine and shared. The businessman bent down and opened his arms, allowing the boy to run to him. When he hugged him, he felt tears burn his eyes. "You're the most amazing dad in the world," the boy said, the words coming out naturally. Over the child's head, he and his wife's eyes met. There was love there, growing silently between them like a plant that finds light through the cracks in the concrete. But the happiness was short-lived. The following week, they received a call that changed everything. The investigator had discovered the identity of the leader of the medical scheme, and the revelation was devastating. "It's her brother-in-law," he said over the phone, "the brother of the husband who left. He's behind the whole operation." The wife was in shock when she heard the news. The man who had comforted her during her brother's funeral, who had offered help during the most difficult times, was the same one who orchestrated the suffering of hundreds of families. "He knew about the documents," she said, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "He's the one who told me where my husband kept the important papers. He encouraged me to look for you." The businessman immediately understood the implications. "He wanted you to come to me. He knew I had invested in the clinic and wanted to compromise me too." "But why?" "Because that way he would have 2 targets to blackmail instead of 1. And if something went wrong, you would be the one to blame for trying to extort me." The revelation that they had been manipulated from the beginning was like a bucket of cold water. The marriage that had started as a business agreement and evolved into something deeper was, in fact, part of a much larger plan. Everything was a lie, she murmured, sinking into a chair. Even this marriage was his idea. No, said the businessman, kneeling before her. What happened between us is real. What I feel for the children is real. The rest doesn't matter. But she pulled away, the pain of family betrayal mixed with the confusion of the feelings she had developed for him. How can I be sure? How can I trust anything now? That night, she packed her bags in silence. She had decided to leave with the children, even knowing that it meant facing the dangers alone. The discovery about her brother-in-law had broken something inside her, a trust that would take a long time to rebuild. When the businessman found the suitcases in the entryway, he felt his heart break. "You can't go," he said. "It's not safe." "I can't stay," she replied, avoiding looking him in the eyes. "I can no longer distinguish what is real from what is manipulation." The children came down to say goodbye, confused and scared by yet another sudden change in their lives. The businessman knelt to hug them, whispering promises that he would always protect them, even from a distance. But as the car drove away, taking the family he had learned to love, he knew that the war was just beginning. The brother-in-law had underestimated one thing. A man in love and with enough resources to move mountains was the most dangerous enemy someone could have. For 2 weeks, the businessman lived like a man obsessed. He hired the best investigators in the country and mobilized all the resources of his company to locate the brother-in-law and completely dismantle the network of fraudulent clinics. His nights were spent awake, studying documents and coordinating operations that cost thousands per day. The mansion had returned to being a silent mausoleum. The children's rooms remained untouched, as if he expected them to return at any moment. The sunroom, where he had shared so many intimate moments with his wife, was now just a painful reminder of what he had lost. It was the chief investigator who brought the first good news. "We found where they are," he said, entering the office with a folder full of photographs. "They're staying at a small hotel on the other side of town. She's trying to get money to leave the country." The photographs showed the woman and the 3 children in a precarious situation. The hotel was fifth-rate, and it was visible that she was struggling to maintain appearances in front of her children. The twins seemed confused and scared, while the boy had regressed in his physical therapy exercises, returning to using a cane to walk. "And the brother-in-law?" asked the businessman, his voice full of contained rage. "He's hiding in a country house 2 hours from here. Our men have confirmed that he's really the leader of the operation. We have enough evidence to completely destroy him." But the businessman didn't just want to destroy the brother-in-law. He wanted to get his family back, and he knew that this would require much more than legal evidence. He needed to regain the trust of the woman he loved, and this would only happen if she understood that his feelings were genuine. That same afternoon, he appeared at the hotel where they were staying. He found her in the tiny lobby, trying to negotiate an extension of the payment deadline with the manager. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears that she tried to hide quickly. "I came to get you," he said simply. "We can't go back," she replied, looking around to check if anyone was listening. "He knows where we live. It's not safe." "I know who he is," said the businessman, his voice low but firm. "I know everything. And I have a proposal." They sat in a corner of the lobby, away from curious ears. He explained everything he had discovered about the brother-in-law, the evidence collected, and the plan to completely expose the fraudulent operation. "Tomorrow, we're going to confront him," he said, "together. I want you to be there when he is forced to confess everything." "Why?" she asked suspiciously. "What do you get out of it?" "A chance to prove that my feelings are real," he replied, looking directly into her eyes. "A chance to show that our family is worth more than any fortune." The next morning, They drove together to the country house where the brother-in-law was hiding. The children stayed with the security team at the hotel, protected but anxious for their mother's return. During the trip, they talked for the first time since the separation. "I'm scared," she admitted, afraid of discovering that everything really was a lie. "Then give me a chance to prove otherwise," he said, taking her hand. "After today, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you, but let me fight for us." The country house was isolated, surrounded by trees that offered perfect privacy for illicit activities. When they arrived, they found the brother-in-law in the backyard, talking on the phone in a conspiratorial tone. Upon seeing them, his face contorted into a mixture of surprise and rage. "So, you finally decided to show up," he said, putting away the phone. "I figured it would take you longer to figure it out." "It's over," said the businessman. "We have enough evidence to prosecute you and your entire network." The brother-in-law laughed, a bitter sound that echoed among the trees. "You don't understand anything. She was always part of the plan. From the beginning." "That's a lie," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Your dear husband didn't die in any accident," continued the brother-in-law, savoring each word. "He discovered our operation and threatened to expose us, so we arranged for his exit from the scene." The revelation struck her like lightning. "You killed my husband?" "Not exactly," he said with a cruel smile. "We just facilitated his permanent departure. But here's the interesting part. He's not dead." The silence that followed was sepulchral. The businessman felt the world spin around him as he processed the implications of those words. "Liar," she murmured. "I saw the body. I went to the funeral." "You saw a body," corrected the brother-in-law. "Not his body. Your husband is very much alive, hiding in another country, collecting evidence to destroy us. I thought it would be interesting for him to know that you married another man." The cruelty of the revelation was like a dagger to the heart. For months, she had mourned a man who was alive while building a new life based on a lie. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice breaking. "On his way," replied the brother-in-law, checking his watch. "In fact, he should arrive any minute." As if summoned by the words, the sound of a car approaching echoed down the road. Everyone turned to see a man getting out of a cab, carrying a suitcase and a folder full of documents. The first husband had aged in the months of forced exile. His hair was graying, and there were worry lines around his eyes. When he saw his wife, his face lit up with a smile that quickly turned to confusion upon noticing the businessman beside her. "My dear," he said, approaching, "we can finally be together again." The reunion that should have been joyful turned into a scene of unbearable tension. She looked alternately at the two men, torn between the relief of knowing that the father of her children was alive and the pain of realizing that the love she had developed for the businessman was too real to be ignored. I got married," she said, the words coming out with difficulty. "Out of necessity," said the first husband, understanding. "I know you needed to protect yourself. Now we can annul that marriage and start over." "It's not just that," she said, tears running down her face. I fell in love with him." The silence that followed was charged with pain and understanding. The first husband looked at the businessman, assessing the man who had protected his family when he couldn't. "Are the children okay?" he asked finally. "They are," replied the businessman. "He taught the boy to walk better, got special medications for the girls. They call him Dad." It was then that the first husband understood the extent of the situation. His family had created new bonds that couldn't simply be undone with his return. "You love each other," he said. It wasn't a question. She looked at the businessman, and for the first time since the revelation of the deception, allowed her feelings to show. "Yes," she whispered. "We love each other." The brother-in-law watched the scene with growing frustration. His plan to destroy both men was crumbling before his eyes. "How touching," he said sarcastically, "but I still have cards up my sleeve." It was then that the first husband opened his folder, revealing years of evidence collected about the brother-in-law's operation. "Actually," he said calmly, "I'm the one holding the cards." During the months of exile, he had worked tirelessly to gather irrefutable evidence against the entire network. There were photographs, recordings, bank records, and testimonies from dozens of victims. "You two were just pawns in a larger game," he explained, "but now we have enough power to end this once and for all." The final confrontation took place right there in the backyard of the house. Together, the three adults confronted the brother-in-law with evidence that left him with no way out. The operation that had deceived hundreds of families was completely exposed, ensuring that justice was done, but the emotional issue still needed to be resolved. During the drive back to the city, the three talked about the future. "The children need stability," said the first husband, "and you two have built something real together." "But you're their father," said the businessman. "They deserve to have you back." "And they will," he replied, "but they also deserve to have the family they chose. You love each other, it's obvious, and the children love you both." The solution they found was unconventional but filled with love and understanding. The first husband legally relinquished his marital rights, allowing the couple to remain married. In return, he would become a constant presence in the children's lives, like a beloved uncle who had returned from a long trip. 6 months later, the reunited family celebrated the couple's first real wedding anniversary. The children had adapted wonderfully to the new dynamics, enjoying the affection of 3 adults who loved them unconditionally. The businessman had used a large part of his fortune to compensate the families harmed by the medical scheme, but he discovered that the true wealth was in the laughter that echoed through the mansion every morning. His company had recovered and prospered, now focused on ethical investments that truly helped people in need. The foundation they created together offered free and effective treatments for children with disabilities, ensuring that no family would go through what they had faced. Love had been born from pain, but had grown in hope, proving that even the most desperate circumstances can be transformed when courageous hearts decide to fight together for a better future. On the night of the anniversary, while the children slept safely and the first husband rested in the guest room that had become his home, the couple met in the sunroom, where it had all begun. "It was worth it," she said, nestling in his arms. "All the suffering was worth it to get here." "Forever," he replied, kissing her hair. "Our family forever." Outside, the stars shone over a family that had discovered that true love is capable of overcoming any obstacle, transforming any pain, and building hope where there had only been despair. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment, giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.